Hi, I'm Matt Quoker. Think about this. In 150 years, every single person on the face of the planet will no longer be here. They'll pass away and die. My name's Matt Quoker. I'm here to ask people like you and me the questions they've always wanted to ask about death. It's raining, so we better head on inside to see what people have to say. Mel, thank you for joining me today on Death Defined. Just before we open, get into some questions, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a 43-year-old mum of 2 girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first job.
Yeah.
My next job, I'm a police officer of 21 years.
Wow.
And I also am a marriage celebrant.
Plethora.
Yes.
Absolute
Just a
plethora.
couple of little things, but I also do a bit of art and I've just started writing a book.
Wow.
Like all that sort of stuff.
So you like to challenge yourself?
I do, yes. It's every day is a challenge because I had breast cancer a few years ago.
Wow.
So I've now 6 years past that. So just...
Well done. Do you think with all of your experience with your job within the police force, with marriage celebrants and your own personal battle with cancer, do you think that these things have changed your perspective on death?
Definitely, because after being faced with the concept of death, after being diagnosed with cancer at the age of 37, my children were only 2 and 4. I thought I'm going to be dead. And for some reason I had 4 years in my head and I had to focus and think, how am I going to plan and how am I going to do all these things before I die?
As a coping mechanism, did you work throughout the process and throughout the treatment and things like that, or did you take leave or...?
Intermittently, I took leave.
Right.
Obviously, when I was having treatment, chemo, it wears you
Of course,
down.
of course.
But in between, I worked, and I was also studying at university. I was doing a Bachelor of Emergency Management.
Wow.
So I was studying at the same time, and I powered on through and made sure I continued on.
So do you think because you had all these things like your children, like your study, your family, do you think with your diagnosis that gave you that power to fight this?
Absolutely. I've always been a go-getter anyway,
Yep.
But it gave me more of a focus to make every day count. You gotta live life to the full while you got it. Because it can be taken away at any time.
Well, through the police, you would
Yeah,
know that,
100%.
especially. And do you think that with when you're going through your treatment, and did you ever have down days where you thought, I can't do this, or that never really entered your...
Never thought I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Some days were harder than others.
Especially with young children.
The day I had to shave my head,
Wow.
I really...
That's powerful.
It's visual.
Mm-hmm.
Other ways, unless people know that you have it, unless you're looking sick, but I didn't look sick.
Right.
The treatments were done really well and I handled them really well, but the visual concept of having my head shaved, that really put me in that frame of mind, is I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do it.
Do you think your exposure to death within the police force and your experiences through the police gave you the strength or gave you the knowledge or experience?
I've been faced with traumatic incidents from a very young age.
Okay.
I think I remember my first ever dead body I saw I was 18.
Wow.
I used to do rescue and it was a car accident. And that was another surreal experience in itself, because I had a vision that night of this person who died, and I'm still to this day not sure if I was dreaming or if I was awake, but he'd lost his arm.
Right.
He was riding a motorbike. The car had hit him.
Yeah.
And it was my job to help find the arm. So I went out. He'd come to me in a vision saying, "You have to find my arm. I can't go on without my arm."
Wow.
And I was the one that found it the next day.
You never forget, well, for me, the first dead person that you see, and I think I take my hat off to you being in the police force, for the length of time that you have, knowing the amount of trauma and stress being in the force does to a person. You're an inspiration because, it's okay. I see people on the other side when they've actually passed, whereas at an MVA or motor vehicle accident, they could go on the scene. To me, I would find that extremely traumatic, seeing someone in pain.
Very.
And for you to do what you've done for the amount of time that you've done, take my hat off to you. Do you think by witnessing these things that it's changed your dynamics as a person, or do you think it's given you a more clearer look on life, or a clearer look out on life, and then the cancer on top, of course?
Yeah, it's just another thing. But yeah, I think it definitely has made me think differently about death. It's also different when it's not you or doesn't involve you.
When you're detached.
Yeah. I'm a very empathetic person, so I do get quite involved, especially if I'm at someone's home where their partner has died, may have died in their sleep, but police have to attend to
or welfare checks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And dealing with family members, I find probably the more difficult side, because I am very empathetic and I often have a cry with them, and I can't help myself.
That's good.
Because
it shows you're human.
Yeah, I feel for those people. They're having a really
tough
like
time.
it's their
It's
worst
hard to
day.
see someone in
It's
pain,
their
isn't
worst
it?
day.
Yeah. How were your feelings about discussing what you wanted in the event the worst case scenario eventuated? Did you discuss that openly? Did anyone bring it up with you?
I tried to discuss it, but I think people were like, "You'll be right. You will be right." But always in the back of my mind, you don't know that.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that.
Yeah.
And I've always had some sort of plan in the back of my mind. I probably should write it down. But
we're gonna do it. They're gonna.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I'll get around to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did discuss it, but my husband would be like, no, you'll be fine.
And that's what I say to people, live every day as your last.
That's right.
Say to that person you love them. Say to that person that, isn't appreciate the sky and the flowers. And, with you two, you're in a very lucky position that as your girls grow older and as they grow up, you've had the experience of all these things on trauma that you've seen in your life to be able to support them.
Yes.
And also it just goes to show your strength as well, that you're still powering on after all this. So your family, your parents and etc., when all this happened, how do you think they coped with it all? Was it
so my dad was devastated. Obviously my mum was devastated. She was with me when I took her with me when I was diagnosed. She tried to take it on board. She's a very negative person.
Right.
So she was telling everybody I was going to die, basically.
Okay.
I'd hear from relatives, "Oh, you're not doing so well," and I'd be like, "I'm fine. I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
I'm not dead, and I'm not going anywhere yet."
Yeah.
So that's very hard. I felt like I was always trying to pump her up.
Right. Do you think that was her coping mechanism, though, to expect the worst, so in the event that eventuated, that would help her cope? Or do you, and again, not generalising, but there's been instances when there's a service held and a person makes it all about them and they're not directly linked to the deceased. Do you, it's a very hard thing because people's coping mechanisms are different. So did you feel that you just let things go, or did you confront, or...?
I actually bought her a book about thinking positively.
Good. Okay.
Because she is that negative personality.
Yep.
And will make things, as you say, about them.
Yep.
So.
And that can be quite toxic to you.
Oh, well, that's a whole other show.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. And both your parents are still with us?
Yes, they are. My dad lives in Canberra.
Right.
He talks about death all the time. He's got Parkinson's disease.
Okay. Yep.
He's had very bad strokes.
Wow.
But and every time we talk on the phone, he's like, "Oh, if I live that long, Dad, stop talking like that.
Yeah.
Please."
Sometimes you think that they want to will it on themselves, don't you? That there's this whole thing of, I mightn't be here. And I think with you and I being exposed the way that we are to all these situations and death itself, that we think with your friend in the police force that was lost. Have you lost actually anyone in the line of duty that you've known of? Or?
I have actually. My first year in the police, I was 22. As a teammate, and he was shot and killed on duty accidentally by one of the other officers. So I'd been working night shift.
Yeah.
I'd gone home, and 3 hours later I got a call that he'd been killed. And I still to this day, it traumatises me. Because I'd never known anyone
it's that shock
killed
of death.
so traumatically that I'd just been talking to hours before, and suddenly they're not there anymore.
How do the police deal with situations like that where where there is such trauma surrounding a team or people?
So my situation, this one was 20 years ago. So they were still developing their ways of caring for their officers.
Yep.
But we had a healthy lifestyles group. They're called something completely different now. But they come in, they talk to you, they give you options. And I just remember being so overwhelmed that I can't remember hearing a lot of what they had to say. Caring for staff back then wasn't as prominent as it is now.
Well, an officer could give it a kick up the backside back then, they wouldn't get in trouble.
Absolutely. I'm a fairly senior officer now, so I've been a sergeant for 10 years, so I'm in charge of junior police, and I always make it my mission to make sure everyone's doing okay. And if they're not, then we have our EAP counselling. We can put them in touch with people. If someone looks like they're struggling, because I know it can be really difficult to ask for help.
Yep.
So I've been there. I've been depressed. I've had PTSD.
Yep.
And until someone points it out to you that something's not right, you might not realise that you're struggling.
Yeah. Yep.
But you've got to stop it before it becomes a big problem.
Do you find the police force has made you harder as a person, or it's made you stronger?
Well, definitely stronger.
Yeah.
Harder in terms of I just don't tolerate stupid people.
I love it. Yes, that's fantastic, Mel. That's the only way to say what you've got to say and get it off your chest. That's the way to be.
I just get sick of stupid people and people doing
That don't
dumb things.
Yeah. So, just quickly, you must don't have any questions for me because you've lived it all.
Well, I don't know much about the funeral industry,
Right,
so
okay.
because I've never really, only when people come to pick up bodies. So what happens once that person has been picked up? Where do they go?
Okay, so with the police that if there's no pre-existing illness, they go straight to coroner.
Yes.
If the family engage the funeral director, they've got either a life extinct form by the
Yes.
ambulance service
Yes.
or a medical certificate cause
Yep.
of death. The family engage the funeral director. Usually the funeral director, as you know, take the deceased into care. There's the protocol for that. And then they go to a holding facility, much like the hospital's morgues.
Okay.
And then the family then run the next day, usually if it's overnight, or they're contacted. They come in for an appointment, or a consultant goes to their house, does the arrangements. So it's a personal choice. Like funerals are changing. Like you'd know yourself. Death is more openly spoken against. To what it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But it all falls upon the family's shoulders and what they want. But the deceased is held in refrigeration until the service happens and the family decide what they want. So yeah.
And how do you find people are able to make decisions in those short few days? Because
usually I say
traumatic.
I know. So yeah. Well, with us, like usually we say the services you're held within. You have roughly 8 days under the Health Act without any preservation to hold a service. We say my mantra is you've got one chance to do a funeral and do it properly. Don't rush.
Yeah.
Take your time. Think about what you need to do. Because a lot of people do. Like you said, it's got to be done within 3 days. It doesn't. You can take your time and, go off the guidance of your funeral director of to how long. But you've got one chance to do it. You've got one chance to say that goodbye, and it's got to be done properly. So for me, with the law now, with the executor, it's not the next of kin that gets the full say. So you would have bear witness to that, where the son or daughter comes in. Well,
Absolutely.
they're doing this and they're doing that. They're the senior. They're the executor. I'm sorry, our hands are tied. Get a court order. That makes it very hard.
It does,
especially when it's fair. And unfortunately, sometimes the funeral director is the meat in the sandwich, where you've got family in conflict that or there's two executors and they don't speak, and one wants one thing and one wants another. It does get quite difficult, and you've just got to step back and say, well, at times you've got to say it's not about you.
Death can bring out the worst in people.
It certainly does, and like police called out to houses because a sibling won't get out of a house, and and unfortunately you've got to be impartial, and that's the same as us. We don't know what's transpired. You have to go in there with a holistic view and say, well, okay, this is a situation. These are the choices. Make a decision.
That's right.
And that's the same as what you do when you go to conflict as well. And as I said, I take my hat off to you because it'll be so, especially when there's real emotion involved. See, people are pretty contained. They've done the initial grieving when they make the funeral arrangements. You bear witness to people in raw emotion, which is very hard. So I think for you, as I said, I take my hat off to you. You are one amazing woman. We're going out for coffee or dinner or something, because I could talk to you for hours. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, Mel. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Here you can hear Mel talking now. She leaves the room. I'm telling you what, she's everyone I deal with in these clips just amaze me every time. Like, this is a woman who sees the worst of life and yet is so positive on life. And she's faced with death. She's been faced with death personally, and yet she's so positive. This is a whole ethos of what I was looking for. This is a whole, she's hit the nail on the head. This is exactly how I want this series to run. People being raw, people with their experiences, and, I'm really pumped. So, that was absolutely amazing. I'm Matt Croker, and this is Death Defined.